A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thank you so much for being a part of another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Hey, there you go. Welcome to the program. It is good to have you with us today. Coming up in just a matter of moments, Jesse Kelly is going to be with us from KPRC in Houston, Texas, host of the Jesse Kelly Show. Not a Jesse Kelly Show, the Jesse Kelly Show. We'll talk, as we did with Tony Katz from WIBC in Indianapolis, Indiana yesterday, about whether or not Jesse's seen any indication that there's any sort of shift or change in his audience and in the Houston, Texas area that he's been able to see that would indicate that there is more support for gun control laws. There appears to be less support from President Trump, at least when it comes to background checks. Our friend Ed Morrissey over at Hot Air with a story today. Trump backs off of background checks, but green light on red flag laws. So Wayne LaPierre, Executive Vice President of the National Rifle Association, apparently had a phone conversation with President Donald Trump. Donald Trump, according to some accounts, said, in essence, Wayne, what do you think about expanding background checks? This would be great for all of us. And Wayne LaPierre's response was no. According to the New York Times, a lot of this push for expanding background checks came from Ivanka Trump, while the president's advisors were, hey, why don't you back off on this? According to the Times, Ivanka Trump had kind of tried to sell her dad on the idea of a Rose Garden ceremony where, the president could sign something and get all kinds of accolades from the press. And it looks like now the president's backing off of the idea of expanding background checks, which might be bad news for Senators Joe Manchin and Pat Toomey, who had the Manchin-Toomey sort of universal background check light bill that they've been pushing. Gun control advocates don't want that, by the way. They say it doesn't go far enough. Ceasefire Pennsylvania, the gun control group there in Pat Toomey's home state, saying that Toomey needs to get behind, quote-unquote, universal background checks. So the president looks like he's moving away from background checks. Red flag laws, however, very much appear to still be on the table. What a federal red flag bill would look like still remains to be seen, although it is likely that we're not talking about any sort of, federal procedure or federal restraining order. Instead, it looks like the legislation would offer grant money and financial assistance and incentives to states that enact a quote-unquote red flag law. It's also likely that any sort of federal legislation would stipulate that any state that wanted to get some of Uncle Sam's dollars would have to put in place certain due process protections, but we don't exactly know what that's going to look like. Again, this is still very much a live issue right now, and there are a lot of details, and when it comes to the red flag laws, the devil's in the details. Again, how long do you have to wait before you get your day in court? Because if there's an ex parte hearing where you're not present, you're not allowed to present your side of the story. Somebody simply goes to a judge and says, Judge, I think this person is a danger to themselves or other. We've got to take their guns away. And in a couple of weeks, maybe you get to tell your side of the story. That's not good enough. That's really not good enough. I still have a lot of concerns. And one of the things that I would love to see a supporter of red flag legislation present is a scenario where the use of a emergency violence restraining order is the more appropriate response than either the existing criminal justice system or the existing civil commitment laws. We've seen a number of stories over the past couple of weeks. I think CNN had a story on Monday talking about, 3 potential mass active assailant attacks that were thwarted by law enforcement, including the case in Connecticut, which has had a quote-unquote red flag law on the books for over a decade, and yet the red flag law wasn't used there. They actually took the individual into custody. They charged him. And that was the case with these other 2 incidents as well. The criminal justice system was the appropriate venue, not a quote-unquote red flag law. So give me the example of where a red flag law would be the best way to address an individual who is a danger to themselves or others, as opposed to a shortcut for the government, as opposed to a half measure by the government. Look, we know it's expensive to throw somebody behind bars. We know that it's expensive to put somebody in acute care and institutionalize them even for a temporary amount of time. We know that comes with a cost, and I think it comes with a much higher financial cost than applying a quote-unquote red flag law, which is one of the concerns that I have, is that this would be seen as an easier step, as a more cost-effective or at least a cheaper step to take, rather than actually addressing the individual who has been deemed to be a danger to themselves or others, and they go and they take any illegally owned guns and then they leave that person to their own devices. Within the existing criminal justice system, you at least have the opportunity to put that individual behind bars so that they're not a threat to themselves or others, or again, put them in a place where they can start to get the treatment that they need so that they're no longer a danger to themselves or others. And I've yet to really hear the scenario where a gun control activist or a supporter of these red flag laws has said, okay, well, look, here's where this would be more appropriate than either using the existing civil commitment laws or the existing criminal justice system. Unfortunately, that really doesn't seem to matter too much to a lot of these politicians who just want to do something, right? And over on the House side of things, Democrats want to do something. They want to pass a bunch of new gun control laws. So when they get back in early September, September the 9th is when the August recess ends and the Senate and the House will get back in session. House Judiciary's Committee going to be meeting a few days ahead of time. They're going to pass 3 gun control bills, and I'm predicting this. I know the vote hasn't happened yet, but I'm going out on a really sturdy limb here and saying they will actually pass these 3 gun control bills. They'll send them over to the Senate, try to pressure Republicans in the Senate to at least vote on these measures, including a magazine ban. And then there's a 4th measure that they're going to approve likely late September, which is a quote-unquote assault ban along with a magazine ban. There's a separate mag ban bill, because they just can't get enough of them, apparently, that the House is going to be considering in early September. My colleague Tom Knight and Bearing Arms have written about this. And again, the problem with a magazine ban, let's say, with a magazine ban. Why don't you support a magazine ban? I had somebody ask me this yesterday. Do you really think that somebody should be able to get a 100-round magazine? Do you really think that should be legal? Yeah. I don't really have an issue with it because we've got so many magazines out there right now that trying to police existing magazines going forward it's a non-starter. I mean, how do you do it? New Jersey has a law in the books. They put it in place earlier this year, a ban on magazine possession if that magazine is greater capacity than 10 rounds. And legal gun owners who had these magazines in their possession were supposed to turn them in, were supposed to destroy them or get them out of the state. And doesn't look like anybody's actually done that. So this might be another charge that you could level on somebody if you arrest them for a violent crime or for another possessory offense. But simply banning magazines doesn't make them go away. In fact, simply banning magazines doesn't end the possibility of making a new magazine. Because with advances in 3D printing, it's really easy to make a magazine. So you can ban them all you want, but you're not going to get rid of them. And if the point of a ban is to try to get rid of them, and yet we know that a ban will not get rid of them, then why are we wasting our time and our energy and expending any sort of political capital on a proposal that frankly violates the Constitution, because magazines over 10 rounds are in common use for lawful purposes, so they are protected under the Second Amendment. But not only is this measure unconstitutional, it's unenforceable, at least until after a crime has been committed. And it's ineffective because, again, it seeks to go after the, hundreds of millions of magazines in this country, as opposed to the much smaller number of Americans who are actually driving violent crime. It gets things backwards. But Democrats think it's popular. Democrats and the media have been doing a pretty good job of trying to sell the American people, and they just ban this, it goes away. Just ban this, a problem is solved. And so they will be pushing not 1, but 2 magazine bans in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, the gun control group March for Our Lives, which was formed after the murders at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, they are out with their gun control agenda now. So they're not just about protesting. They've got an actual plan that they want to see put in place. I imagine they're going to be pitching this pretty heavily to 2020 Democratic presidential candidates. And frankly, it looks a lot like the policies that we have seen from many of the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates. Cory Booker's out with gun licensing. Beto O'Rourke wants a gun ban and a buyback, right? This is, and I think that we'll see those two policies sort of become standard talking points for Democratic candidates here in 2020. But that's exactly what the March for Our Lives groups is pushing here. This is from NPR. Under the group's proposal for a licensing program, in addition to a prospective buyer passing a background check, law enforcement agencies would conduct in-person interviews, check the buyer's personal references, and ensure that the gun purchaser passes a safety training course. So we're going to come back to the rest in just a second here, but let's talk about this because that looks a lot like New Jersey's gun licensing law. Where if you want to, own a firearm, you have to get your, permission slip from your local issuing authority, your pistol purchase permit. It's not a gun license exactly, but in order to legally purchase a firearm in New Jersey, you have to get what's called a pistol purchase permit. And in some cases, that's exactly what they're looking for. They're going and they're asking for character references. Yeah, of people who will say, oh, yeah, I think Cam's okay to own a gun. You have to get your neighbors or coworkers or friends or two people that to sign off on you exercising a constitutionally protected right. That's absurd. What happens if you move to a new state? You don't know too many people. What happens if you're an introvert? What happens if you, work from home and you don't talk to many people each and every day? How on earth do you tie in the exercise of a constitutional right by getting others in your community to sign off on you exercising that right first? Also, again, ensuring that the gun purchaser passes a gun safety training course before they could actually purchase a firearm. You know what that's going to do? That's going to really drive down the number of people who are legal gun owners in this country. We have, and this is something that I would love to hear gun control advocates explain. On the one hand, we've seen gun control advocates acknowledge we want fewer gun owners. In fact, March for Our Lives says we want fewer legal gun owners in this country. Fewer legal gun owners. We want fewer Americans exercising their Second Amendment rights. And so we're going to put these barriers in place so that a lot of them will just say, it's not worth it. And at the same time, they say, but we want people to be responsible. Look, if you want to mandate that people go through a training course before they can own a firearm, you better make sure that they've got the opportunity to go to one of these safety courses, right? I mean, think about this. In our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., 10 years ago now, 11 years ago now, the Heller decision came down by the Supreme Court, ending Washington, D.C.'s ban on handguns. It's been more than a decade. There's still no gun stores in Washington, D.C., and there are still no public ranges in Washington, D.C. If you want to get a concealed carry license in Washington, D.C., you have to leave the District of Columbia to get the required training because it's not offered anywhere in the district. We've seen places like Alameda County, California, set up zoning laws in place that will virtually prohibit the establishment of any new gun store or range in the area. And so the same folks who are hostile to you exercising your right to keep and bear arms, we're supposed to believe that they embrace the idea of ranges and access to ranges? I don't think so. Again, the intention is not to ensure that people get the training that they should have. The intent is to stop people from becoming legal gun owners in the first place. I would be much more impressed, and I would be much more likely to consider this a serious proposal if there was, something about increasing range access, but there's not. It's just a laundry list of gun control proposals. Licenses, they say, would be renewed annually among completion of these requirements. And on top of that, according to NPR, there's an annual fee. Yeah, that, quote, any responsible gun owner would pay into the national licensing system for the ability to possess and use firearms. So you have to pay a fee in order to exercise your rights. Again, that's a non-starter. That's not going to fly. And who would be, forget the constitutional arguments for a second. Who's going to be most impacted by a proposal that says, hey, listen, if you want to legally exercise your rights, you got to pay a fee to the government? Right? Lower income Americans. So you're telling the good people who live in high crime neighborhoods, we're going to make it exponentially harder for you to have a gun to protect and defend yourself. But we're not going to do a damn thing to actually ensure that violent criminals go behind bars if they're caught and are convicted of a crime. We're not going to do anything to target these individuals to try to get them to change their ways so that violence gets reduced in your neighborhoods. We're not going to bother with them at all. All of our policies are aimed at you, either the existing legal gun owner or the American who wishes to be a legal gun owner. And we feel like if we put all these laws in place, we cast that wide net over everybody, that there'll be some sort of little trickle-down effect, and eventually it will touch and reach the violent criminals, and they will have a harder time committing violent crimes. That's their plan. It's a bad plan. It's an unconstitutional plan. It is an ineffective plan. I believe it is a largely unenforceable plan, but that's their plan. So Jesse Kelly from KPRC in Houston, Texas, here to talk about whether or not ideas like this are getting any traction whatsoever, at least as best as he can tell, where he lives. Take a look and listen. Jesse Kelly, it is good to see you, sir.
It's good to be on with you, Cam. How are you, my brother?
I'm good. I'm going to have a couple of random questions for you later because I know that you like those random questions out of nowhere, but... Let's get started here. We had Tony Katz from WIBC in Indianapolis on the program yesterday. And one of the things that I'm curious about is, we're seeing all these polls showing, things have changed when it comes to gun control. Americans are more supportive of gun control. There was a Republican poll of some battleground districts showing suburban women are demanding gun control right now. And so I'm just curious. I know that, you've got your own bias, but among your audience, and from what you're hearing there in the Houston, Texas area, are you seeing a new appetite, a bigger appetite for gun control right now?
None. And actually, I don't think there's any appetite for it nationally. I have this theory, Cam, if you'll indulge me for a second. It's called the gladiator theory. And that I think if the gladiatorial games, the brutal ancient Roman games, were dropped into society today, and I'm talking killing prisoners, guys slicing each other up with swords, killing animals, I think every single person in this country would admit, if they were asked, they would say, well, I wouldn't watch that. Oh, that's barbaric. Oh, those Romans are savages. And then privately, they would all buy the pay-per-view and watch it. I think we are living in a society where the media has shamed so many people for so many reasons that you can't publicly poll anything anymore, and gun control's no different. After every single mass shooting, every talking head runs to the microphone and says, it's the guns, it's the guns, it's the guns. If you believe in guns, you're an absolute murderer. And then a week later, they poll everyone and they say, hey, Americans want to ban guns. No, Americans are just, they don't want to be yelled at, and they're too ashamed or too quiet about what they really believe.
I think that there is something to that. And it'll be interesting to see. We've got elections in Virginia here in just a couple of months. And again, supposedly, gun control is a winning issue for Democrats. We had 2 days of hearings this week at the Virginia Crime Commission where they debated all kinds of Ralph Northam's gun control proposals. But we also actually heard, real ideas that have been put in place around the country that have dramatically reduced violent crime that don't involve new gun control laws. And I think really that's what Americans are looking for. Politicians are hearing people say, do something, do something. And so they're thinking, well, I guess that means I got to do something with gun control. I don't think that's it. I mean, I think if there are effective, proven solutions that politicians can put forward that don't impact the constitutional rights of Americans, frankly, that I think is what Americans really want.
Agreed. And I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that Americans want politicians to, quote, do something. I don't, by the way. I never want a politician to do anything. Just leave me alone. But a lot of Americans would agree, well, yes, I want them to do something. But then if you were to break down what the politician actually wants to do, Americans would say, no, that sounds horrible. They want someone to do something because they want the feeling that something is being done. They want this madness. They want something. When something horrible happens, Americans want to be told, humans want to be told, I will do something to make sure this never happens again, to make sure you never have to feel this way again in your life. When the truth of the matter is they don't want to hear the truth. We as humans don't want to hear the truth. It's going to happen again. People are sick and evil, and you need to protect yourself because no one else can protect you.
Talking again with our friend Jesse Kelly. So let's talk about some of these proposals. The March for Our Lives group just came out today with their gun control proposal. And echoing Beto from El Paso there wants a gun ban, wants a quote-unquote buyback, right, or a compensated confiscation program of any firearm that they deem to be quote-unquote assault weapons. And then it gets kind of fuzzy. Beto says if you were found to be in illegal possession of one of these guns, one of these battlefield weapons of war, Jesse, that you would be fined, which strikes me as a little odd. On the one hand, Beto says nobody needs these battlefield weapons of war. We got to get these weapons of war off American streets. And if we catch you with one of these guns, we're going to fine you. Huh?
Well, that's because they're all too afraid to say the quiet part out loud, Cam. And a couple of them have leaked it out. A couple of them have been caught saying it at political events. Look, they want to send the police to your home to pick up these weapons. Democrats want confiscation. If they were serious about reducing crimes that are committed with weapons, they'd be going after handguns, not AR-15s. I mean, you probably know the number better than I do, but I believe it's 80% of crimes, violent crimes that are committed with a weapon are committed with a handgun. That's a gun that so many Americans have in their home. They're not committed with the big, scary AR-15, the, quote, weapon of war, which it's not really. So, look, the bottom line is they're trying to hedge around the issue of what they really want. What they want is all weapons banned. They want a complete government confiscation of all weapons, and they're not above sending the law enforcement in this country to your home to knock on your door to take them. And Americans know that, and they won't let it happen.
Well, and I think that you're right about handguns. The Supreme Court has said you can't ban handguns, right? That's unconstitutional. So we're not going to hear a lot of talk about handgun bans at the moment. We are hearing talk about, packing the Supreme Court, overturning the Heller decision. And if that happens, Katie bar the door. But right now, what we're hearing about in terms of, handgun ownership is, well, we need to license gun owners. One of the things that was brought up actually here in Virginia this week from a researcher at Boston University was, if you were to license handgun ownership, if you were to allow law enforcement to deny people their right to carry for any reason or no reason whatsoever, then we could reduce homicides in this country. There's a researcher at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health who says that, these restrictive licensing laws, like what they have in Massachusetts, don't just stop criminals from illegally obtaining guns, or maybe don't stop criminals from obtaining guns at all, but it actually stops legal gun owners who have no ill intent whatsoever from exercising their Second Amendment rights, because there are so many burdens and barriers that the state puts in place that they decide, forget it, it's not worth it to try to exercise my right. I mean, I think that's an amazing thing for gun control advocates to acknowledge and admit, that we actually need to use the government to get in the way of Americans from exercising their constitutional rights. Government is supposed to protect our rights. Government is supposed to support our constitutional rights, not try to stop us from exercising those rights.
But that's the fundamental disconnect we see, Cam, that the left does not view government in those terms. The left views government as their Lord and Savior, and government is supposed to do things and help people and do these things when government can't do it. And licensing a gun is the worst thing ever. I mean, I would just caution anyone who thinks that that's a good idea. The government wants to, license your guns. A House Democrat just called for a federal watch list to put any, quote, white nationalist on that watch list. And then major Democrats have constantly been saying anybody who votes for Donald Trump is a white nationalist. So do the math. Do you want the government to put you on a watch list for some reason and then tell you you're denied a license to carry a weapon? I don't need a license from the federal government to carry a weapon. I I have the Second Amendment. I can carry any weapon I feel like.
So speaking of President Trump, we're hearing now, seeing a lot of stories that President Trump backing away from background checks after talking with Wayne LaPierre of the NRA, but that quote unquote red flag legislation is still something that the president is pursuing. We don't know what any sort of final bill would look like at the federal level. Likely would not be a federal red flag law, but would be some sort of bill that would, throw money at states to adopt their own red flag laws. What's your position, Jesse, on these quote unquote red flag laws, both the ones that are in place around the country and then some of the proposals that you've heard from politicians?
That's a horrible idea. We're coming fresh off a 2-year, well, actually a 3-year investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Justice, where they used a FISA warrant that was obtained using intelligence from the Democrat Party and from a foreign intelligence agent to spy on an American citizen. And so we just see the corruption that can take place with the judicial system, with the Department of Justice, with the highest levels of the FBI. We're coming fresh off of that, and you're now going to tell me, well, just trust us. We're gonna put this in the hands of a judge to decide whether or not you're allowed to have a weapon, whether you're guilty of thought crimes that let us come confiscate your weapon. It's not going to work. It will be abused. Either it'll be abused today or 10 years from now or 20 years from now by some new leftist hack who decides that your pro-life sticker on your car means you're guilty of thought crimes and should have your weapon confiscated. It's a horrible idea. It will be abused like all government power will be abused. People need to take accountability for their own protection. And nobody likes to hear that, but that's tough. That's reality.
All right, talking again with our friend Jesse Kelly. Jesse, where can folks find you on the radio and on the TV too?
Yeah, TV too, but focus on The Jesse Kelly Show. It's on iHeart. It's available every night, Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 Eastern live, and all the podcasts are right there. I think people will enjoy it.
Excellent. Fantastic. All right, 2 random questions before you go. Favorite breed of dog?
Lab.
And best dinner for a keto diet?
Probably a double bacon cheeseburger, curly fries with ranch to dip it in, and a strawberry shake.
Sounds beautiful. The doctor is in. Jesse Kelly, as always, man, it's good talking with you. Hope we get a chance to do this again soon.
We will. Be good, brother.
All right, talk to you soon. I don't know why I'm hungry now for some reason. Feel like going on the keto diet. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, as well as a look at the failures of our existing criminal justice system. In fact, let's start there in Paducah, Kentucky, where police have arrested this gentleman for the second time in 2 weeks, and as it turns out, like the 4th time this year, 42-year-old Cleon Tanner of Cairo, Illinois, arrested in Paducah, Kentucky on Monday. Actually, as he showed up for court, he was wanted at an outstanding warrant for evading police last week. When officers attempted to stop him, Tanner allegedly took off at a high rate of speed. Officers did not pursue at that time because of the proximity to an elementary school. August the 9th, Tanner was arrested for being a felon in possession of a firearm. And as local media reports, back in January of this year, he was arrested on charges of second-degree domestic assault, as well as being a persistent felon. And then in June of this year, he was also arrested on 3 counts of first-degree trafficking of a controlled substance, that controlled substance being cocaine. So you've got 4 arrests for Mr. Tanner, at least 3 separate crimes. And yet, according to KFVS, Channel 12 there in Kentucky, Cleon Tanner just keeps bonding out and getting back out onto the streets. It's amazing. Rather than enforcing the existing gun laws on the books, another example of how the court system would rather just catch and release criminals there. In Liberty County, Texas, we had a armed mom who was able to protect herself and her kids from a burglary suspect. That would be the individual. Israel Martinez is his name, and he showed up at the home of Dana Clover about 7 o'clock Monday morning, knocking on her front porch. Now, Dana says she lives in a rural area. She says she always has a gun on her. And so she had her handgun, by her side when the knock on the door came. Martinez said that he had been at his girlfriend's home, and then his girlfriend's dad came in and started chasing him, and so he ran. And could he just please call his grandma? And Dana said, no. She said, you wait here. Give me the number. I'll call grandma. But she said as he sat down on the front porch, she noticed that he had a pair of gloves sticking out of his back pocket. Now, it's July in Texas. Nobody's wearing gloves to keep their hands warm. And as she noted, not too many guys are going to wear gloves to go, sneak in and visit their girlfriend. So rather than call Israel's grandma, she called the Liberty County Sheriff's Office and said, yeah, there's this guy here. Oh, good. We've been looking for him, they said. As it turns out, Israel Martinez was a suspect in a burglary of a trailer. And when deputies arrived, Martinez took off running towards Dana Clover's home. So Dana said she grabbed a bigger gun and kept it trained on Israel Martinez through the porch door. Deputies arrived. They were able to take him in custody. They did find a firearm on Israel Martinez, and they also found several guns that had been stolen in sort of a path between Dana Clover's home and the burgled trailer. So, I wonder what might have happened here. Israel Martinez right now behind bars facing burglary charges, but odds are he's probably going to be facing some more serious offenses before long as well. Now, our good deed of the day from Willoughby, Ohio, where an officer came to the aid of 3 individuals inside a burning home. That home, unfortunately, a total loss, but the good news is there was no loss of life here, thanks to the quick thinking of Officer Shane Roz, who is one of the motorcycle officers there in Willoughby, Ohio. And before the fire trucks even got to this home, Officer Roz was there on scene. He ran into that burning building. He pulled out 3 elderly individuals who were inside. The Willoughby Fire Department pulls up. They're able to rescue some of the pets that were inside that home. Again, unfortunately, the home is a total loss, but this could have been so much worse. Lieutenant Jim Schultz with the Willoughby, Ohio Police Department says that Officer Roz is, quote, one of our finest, and in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Officer Roz, we thank you for your very good deed. And that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. Thank you again for being a part of the program. Tomorrow, we're going to talk with forensic psychiatrist Dr. Dennis Petruccelli, who was one of many Virginians testifying before the Virginia Crime Commission this week. This was the body that examined and investigated all of the gun control laws that Virginia Governor Ralph Northam wanted to slap on the books after the shooting in Virginia Beach earlier this year. Governor Northam called for a special session, wanted to ram through these gun control laws. Republicans said, all right, time out. We're going to have the Crime Commission take a look at these, offer up any recommendations, and then they'll present that report in November when lawmakers return to Richmond. This is after elections in the state of Virginia, in which every legislative seat is up for grabs. Right now, Republicans narrowly hold a majority in the legislature. Democrats are hoping to change that in November. And if they are successful in doing so, they're going to pass, and Governor Northam is going to sign, gun control bills that will make Virginia look a heck of a lot more like New Jersey or California than a free state that respects the Second Amendment. So Dr. Dennis Petruccelli, among those presenting his point of view at the Virginia Crime Commission, specifically talking about the quote-unquote red flag laws and the problems that he has with them. We'll talk again with Dr. Petruccelli about that on tomorrow's Cam & Company. Thanks so much for being a part of the program today. Don't forget, you can find the show on iTunes, on Spotify, on Stitcher. Of course, on YouTube, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media, and you can get Bearing Arms Cam & Company delivered each and every day. Thank you, as always, for listening and for watching and for spreading the word, and we will see you back here tomorrow with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company.